Coming up on Oakdale Update, we'll get a wrap-up of the recent legislative session with State Senator Susan Kent. We'll show you some highlights from the recent Oakdale Area Chamber of Commerce Community Picnic, and we'll take a look at some upcoming city events. Stay tuned. Oakdale Update is straight ahead. Hello and welcome to Oakdale Update. I'm your host, Frank Orsello. This is the City of Oakdale's news and information program about your community. Senator Susan Kent represents Districts 53, which includes the City of Oakdale. Senator Kent is here today to tell us about the recent legislative session. Senator, thanks for joining us on Oakdale Update.
Glad to be here.
I think this is about second or third time you've been here, isn't it?
That's right.
Okay, so we've got so much to talk about today, but let's always start out. Tell me about yourself so our people know.
I'm Susan Kent, and I live in Woodbury with my husband, Chris, who is a Maplewood native, and our son, Andrew, who just graduated from Woodbury High School. I am in my second term in the state Senate, so I just finished my 7th session. I'm the assistant DFL leader representing the suburbs, which is really exciting because the suburbs, have often kind of been a little forgotten and overlooked in state legislative politics, but that's really changing. And so I'm glad to be able to represent this part of our state.
Why is that changing? What's happening that's changing?
Historically, these were all swing districts, and so people really didn't get a lot of seniority. They didn't really learn how the process worked necessarily. That's not true for everybody. My colleague Chuck Uyghur here in Oakdale also has been there for a long time. But you're seeing more sort of critical mass in the suburbs, and the suburbs have just grown, and they represent a bigger part.
Oh, certainly. Okay, so you are District 53. Tell me where that is. What does that include?
District 53 includes the entire city of Woodbury, Landfall, and then I've got the southern part of Oakdale, which is up to 10th Street, and then South Maplewood. Okay.
All right, now, so this last session, I always have my people on. Tell me, give me a rating between 1 and 10, 10 being the best. How would you rate this last session?
I got to use two scales here. In terms of the outcome, I'd give it a 6 or a 7. In terms of the process, I'm going to have to bring that down to a 4. This, in many ways, and I've, having been there, this is my 4th biennium that I've worked on in terms of doing a budget year. This was really rough, in terms of bills being heard, in terms of the openness of the process. And I like to say that it's not a matter of, how I feel about whether or not I'm included. If I'm not included, the 80,000 plus people that I represent aren't included. And that's true across the entire legislature.
And I hate to say this, but isn't that kind of true in the national level, on a national level too?
When I was elected in 2012, and my first session was the 2013 session. And I remember thinking, Washington's really bad, but things are better here in St. Paul. And I have seen a decline, even just in the time that I've been there. But I know there are some real efforts. I really applaud House Speaker Melissa Hortman. I think she made a very good faith effort. I believe Governor Walz made a really good faith effort. And I appreciated that Senate Majority Leader Paul Gazelka wanted to have some new steps to make the process more open, but when push came to shove, when it came to those final negotiations, the Senate Republicans just weren't coming to the table.
Sure. How is it working with Walz? Is he? I see him on TV. He just seems to be cool, calm, and collected, and I like that about our leaders.
Yeah. I would agree. In my experiences working with him and observing him closely in different settings, passionate, knowledgeable, really engaged, really committed to the people of Minnesota and trying to find solutions. And we saw that throughout this session. I think the energy that he has brought, a new energy, obviously being new in this role, but also new in state government. So he comes at this with the perspective of having been in Congress, which is, pro and con, I suppose.
Sure, yeah.
But it's fresh eyes at the state level, which I think has been helpful in terms of problem solving and having the conversations.
Just while he was running, it was just so calm. The calm thing, and I hate to say it, but in Washington, nothing is calm.
Yeah.
With our president, he just leads the pack in that field. And
I think when you're a teacher all those years, you learn how to stay pretty calm.
Exactly. I think that my lady friend she's a retired teacher, and she said that you have to be being a teacher. Good observation there.
Yeah.
All right, so we're here to talk about this session, and we got more than we can possibly cover, but let's get started. Okay, so what passed this year. So I'm going to mention something, and you tell me what your take is on it. The health provider tax, 2%. It went from 2% medical service down to 1.8. But fill me in.
This is an important, and this can get way in the weeds, and I'm going to try to avoid that because I know we're going to try to cover a lot of ground.
Yeah.
But the health provider tax is intended to help provide medical benefits to people who need them, whether it's working Minnesotans who are lower income and can't afford it, so they get some help with their health care access, Medicaid, which people forget, a lot of that's nursing homes and seniors and people with disabilities. So if that funding went away, which was the goal, it was scheduled to go away, it was scheduled to expire or sunset as we call it, and the Senate Republicans were really committed to making that sunset go through, then we'd have to find that money someplace else. And so then you're talking about big cuts to our school budgets, other programs that serve people with the seniors and disabilities and veterans and corrections that got a lot of attention this year. And there was never a good solution of how we were going to solve that. So basically what you're doing, and the way they had sort of set it up in their budget proposals for the Senate Republicans, it would leave a big hole in the budget in the next couple of years. We could cover it with the surplus for now. We could borrow some reserve funds and cover it for now. But it'd be like, you've got just a huge debt just a couple years down the road. And, I personally am very committed to making sure that we stay on solid fiscal footing.
Okay, so it went from 2% down to 1.8.
Yep.
Is that a big deal?
In the world of compromise, I think, those of us who felt like, and I understand there are practitioners who struggle with different aspects of that program, and I hear from dentists, for example, some mental health professionals. But until we come up with a reasonable alternative,
sure.
It'll mean too many cuts to too many Minnesotans who need it and rely on it, and then it would also be a big budget problem for everybody.
Okay, now the opiates, increased fees to prescription drug companies. I don't understand that. That's what I'm going by. There was an article in the paper on it. Increased fees to them?
So there is a fee that the pharmaceutical companies pay. This gets a little out of my wheelhouse, so I'm not going to go into the weeds too much on this one. But it is a fee that they already pay in. What we did was we really escalated that fee. And the idea is they have profited off these particular medications for couple of decades now.
Sure.
There is a lot of concern. There are lawsuits happening talking about their business practices and the way they represented the addictive qualities of them to doctors and other professionals. And after all those billions of dollars of profits, you know what, they can help us solve this problem. And so that's what the purpose of that fee was, and it was done on a very bipartisan basis.
But it said increase the fees. Were they already paying
There already
the fee?
was a little fee, and I forget exactly how that, I'll be honest, the exact nature of that fee. It is a fee that they pay as a part of doing business in Minnesota. And this was a pretty extensive increase in that fee to help cover these programs to help solve the issue of addiction.
Okay, down in my list here, we're going to be talking about the insulin. Tell me about that. It didn't pass.
It didn't pass.
It didn't pass. And today is the 7th, and yesterday, 6th, what is today? 8th, 7th?
9th.
8th? 8th? I don't know. Summer goes so fast.
Yes.
Anyway, but yesterday there was a big article in the Sunday paper, and it was about people driving to Canada to get insulin because the legislature did not help them out to get the price down on insulin. And to make a long story short, it was, because I know you haven't read it yet, but you will, but for people that didn't read it, these people took a bus ride up to London, Ontario, and they bought $23,000 worth of insulin for $1,500.
Right.
They would have paid the $23 down here.
Right.
Now, that is just obscene. So
Right.
help me out here.
Well, this is one that, we were covering things that did get done, and those were the good side of the ledger. This is an important one that didn't get done, and, it looks like it was really a matter of partisan stuff, and I watched that happen. I, in fact, sit next to Senator Melissa Wickland on the floor, and she offered the amendment to try to get it included. It's called the Alex Smith bill, and it's named after a young man who had just aged out of his parents' health insurance policies, and he was rationing his insulin because he couldn't afford to buy it as often as he needed it, and at about 26 years of age, he passed away because he didn't have his insulin.
He was trying to ration his
Exactly.
insulin, and it killed him.
And it killed him, yes. And that's just inexcusable. Part of the history of insulin, and I think this is part of why these folks went to that part of Canada, is because the original people who invented, if you will, because it's a hormone, but identified this substance to solve the insulin challenges for people with diabetes, they did not claim their patent rights because they believed strongly that this was a public good and that that people should not be profiting off of it. This should be going to help people in terms of their health because this is so basic. And this, again, we can get into the process of the end of session and the way the negotiations went. Governor Walz was there was some debate over why it didn't make it into the final bill, and that had to do with the process. Governor Walz was ready to take this language and put it in the bill. Speaker Hortman was, and Senate Majority Leader Paul Gazelka has said it's not ready. And I find that really troubling because this means it'll be at least a year for people like Alex Smith, who, if they're facing these challenges, and the answers we get is, well, people can just go to the emergency room, or you can just go to a doctor and they, no, this stuff costs so much, nobody just has it to hand out. I don't know where they think it comes from. And the idea behind this bill would be similar to the opioid issue. The pharmaceutical companies have to step up and start subsidizing this for people who really need it and just simply don't have access to it. And it's not just a matter of if you don't have health care, because it is so expensive and because of co-pays, people who have good health care benefits still struggle to pay their share of this expensive.
The people in that article, there was 100, each one had a different story to tell. I mean, as to why they have it and why they couldn't get it, or why they're paying so much for it, and why they quit using it. I mean, it's a killer. It'll kill these people.
It will kill you. And it's the easiest thing in the world.
Exactly.
To avoid that problem if they have ready access.
If Canada can do it, why can't we?
Well, and countries around the world are able to do it. We uniquely somehow managed to not put these requirements on our pharmaceutical industry.
Okay, so what would you people do? Would you make them lower their prices? I mean, you can hardly do that, I suppose.
The nature of this particular proposal, this bill that was heard at different points throughout the session in both the House and a little bit in the Senate, and actually was voted on in the Senate at different points, it just didn't somehow make it into the final bills, is that, again, the pharmaceutical companies, similar to the opioid, would be paying into it. It's a different structure, it's not that same sort of fee, but it is asking them to step up to solve this problem.
What we need them to do is lower the prices. I mean,
well, that's exactly right.
How,
yeah, and that's something that really has to come from Congress. And I'm so proud of our federal delegation because I know Amy Klobuchar, for example, has worked really hard on this, as has Senator Tina Smith. But in the meantime, what can we do here in Minnesota to help Minnesotans? That's what we're trying to look for.
So, did you have a grassroots bunch of people down there? These people, I'm sure
gosh,
they were.
yes.
Were they there?
I mean, and it's as a mother, my son is just a little bit younger than Alex Smith, and it's just heartbreaking that she's in this position. She should be able to just grieve her son, but instead she's out there fighting for everybody else who needs this and doesn't, and is facing life-threatening situations because they don't have access to it.
I know you're going to read this article, and I recommend our television audience to try and catch it too, because it was just heartbreaking. So we'll go back to grassroots. We're just skipping around here, but we'll go to another grassroots as the phone, the phone.
Hands-free.
The hands-free.
Yes.
I mean, I know so many people that were down there fighting for this, and it worked. So tell us about that.
Well, that's one. So I've been on the Transportation Committee since I was elected. I was the vice chair for my first 4 years in office, and I'm still on the committee. And during that entire time, we have heard this bill, and it has been blocked and obstructed, and excuses have been given, why we can't vote for it, and why we can't put it through, et cetera, et cetera. And so I have listened, and it's usually parents, again, of young adult or teenage drivers who have lost their lives because somebody was too distracted, couldn't put their phone down, and caused a crash that killed their loved one. And so I've listened to this heartbreaking testimony for all these years. And so finally this year, and I'm glad we did it, but I am still a little disappointed that it took, I mean, how many people lost their lives in those intervening years because we couldn't step up to it earlier? I get a little frustrated with this mindset that, well, it's not quite ready yet. Oh, and I get we need to be careful, we need to be cognizant of unintended consequences, but this had been vetted over and over and over again. Many states have done this. There's no reason we couldn't have done it sooner, but I'm glad we did it.
My son is in the Navy station in Ohio. He says they've had that for years.
Yeah.
Years.
Many states have. Yes.
And here we are, leg and all.
Yep.
Okay, so with this other, we're bouncing around, I know.
Good.
But sexual assault response to the Star Tribune had a wonderful article, and not a wonderful, I mean, it was well done.
Powerful.
Powerful, okay, that's the word. About women, especially women, who were sexually assaulted, and the rape kits were lost, the samples were lost, the coppers wouldn't even take their stories. Anyway, what did we do on that one?
So I agree with you. I think this is such a great example of the power of solid journalism, because just like the case of elder abuse, and the Star Tribune did that work there too.
We're going to talk about that one too, for sure.
And so it brings these cases to light, and we have an opportunity to really look at them on a systemic basis. This is a case where I think there might have been some things we could have done, but it is hard, particularly in a quick turnaround time on these complex issues that affect communities of varying sizes around the state, to do a sort of a quick one-size-fits-all solution out of St. Paul. And so what we came up with was a task force. And so you will have people who see this both from a victim's perspective, from family members' perspective, from law enforcement, from prosecution, defense attorneys, everybody involved in this process, and experts in sexual assault and healing. And have them at the table and really talk about what can be done, and come forward back to us with recommendations, and then we'll take those up in the coming years.
Good deal. Okay, so bouncing around, gas tax did not pass.
Did not pass.
Now, I want to ask you a question. Road construction is just happening all over the Twin Cities area and the state, for that matter. Where's that money coming from? Okay, the gas tax did not pass. It was 20 cents, and it did not. Nothing came out of it. You didn't get a nickel. You didn't get pennies. Didn't get anything, right? Okay, so where's all this money coming from for all the stuff that's being done?
It's not that we don't have revenue, right? I mean, so we have the gas tax, which I always like to remind people is 100% dedicated to roads and bridges. And then we have motor vehicle sales tax, and we also have registration fees and tabs that go into roads and bridges as well. Part of the motor vehicle sales tax does go to transit, but the other is fully to roads and bridges. So that money is there. So there is money coming in, and MnDOT does a good job of balancing the needs to keep work being done. But I live right in my district, and people in this area well know the interchange of 94, 694, and 494. And there's a big project going on right now. Last I heard, that was about a $40 or $50 million project. A big chunk of that was actually federal money that we were able to get for public safety purposes to make some improvements on that interchange. I have a bonding bill that I've carried now for a couple years to really fix that interchange. And it would involve probably some flyovers and some different things like that. Because the old cloverleaf for 18-wheelers, and I just literally today, this is why I haven't read that article yet, I literally today drove down from northern Minnesota, and you see it's the bypass right through my community, and we are not prepared for all that truck traffic. The freight traffic that keeps growing in our state is ridiculous. So we're spending $40 to $50 million to put a very expensive Band-Aid, when if we had the revenue coming through, we could not spend that $40 or $50 million. We could apply that to the real pot of money that we need in order to fix that. And that's just one example. If you have maintenance problems on your roof and you don't take care of those,
you're in big trouble.
You know that's going to get more and more expensive. Absolutely. And that's what we're doing. We're just patching over things in ways. And what's frustrating to me, and like I said, I've been on the transportation committee all these years, you know, it's an old truism, there is no free lunch. There sure as heck aren't free roads and bridges.
Sure.
And I know nobody wants to pay more in gas tax, but and we obviously have, as our vehicle systems are changing, we're going to have to address that too, right? But in the meantime, for the problems we have right now in terms of our infrastructure, we have to step up. Our parents and our grandparents' generation did that. That's why we've had the infrastructure that we've had here in Minnesota, but now we're not keeping up with it. Sure. When we last raised the gas tax in 2008, and people like to talk about because it doesn't keep up with inflation, so that buying power is just basically no longer there. Sure. Well, somebody ran the numbers recently. That gas tax increase that we as Minnesotans took on a little over 10 years ago, that's now canceled out of our pocketbooks.
Sure.
That's gone.
Yep.
So even if we just went back and reinstated what we did a little over 10 years ago, that would at least be helpful, but it still wouldn't be solving the problem. And the one other thing I'll say, because I keep referencing my 18-year-old son, there's no other area in life that I run up a debt that I'm going to expect him to pay off for me.
Absolutely.
And that's what we're doing to our kids.
Absolutely.
By not taking care of our infrastructure. Yep. And transit is a part of that list too.
Absolutely. Okay, we're running out of time. Can you imagine? Okay, I want one other thing that I really want to mention. Elderly protection to license assisted living facilities.
Yes.
Aren't they? I thought they were already.
I know, right? That was another thing that the Star Tribune did some important work on.
The Star Tribune did a wonderful
I
article
have a
on that.
constituent whose mother was featured in some of that coverage.
Really?
Tragically, yes.
Okay.
And you're right. We are, I think, one of the only two or only one state in the union that does not license assisted living facilities. And it's another one that we should have been able to do more about a year ago. When this first came out, I was really disappointed that we didn't. Once again, you run into the push-pull of industry,
Sure.
who doesn't want regulations.
Sure.
And then, you know, this very human story, we all have older relatives that we're worried about and dealing with these care issues. I recently lost my father to dementia, but I'm glad we were able to get some stuff done here and start making some progress on that. So we have a pathway to take care of this.
Okay. We're out of time. I mean, God, we were out of time. I'm just trying to think if there's anything I wanted to make sure we got to. We touched so many things, but not enough. So I think we're gonna have you back again, okay?
Love to.
We'll try and get you before the next session. How's that? And then we can talk about things coming up.
Sounds
okay?
good.
Thank you so much for being here,
Absolutely.
and you're
Thank
very
you.
knowledgeable. You know what you're talking about, and I appreciate that.
Important things to talk about. A lot of important stuff got addressed, and we need to keep making progress.
Absolutely. Okay. Very good. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Frank.
Every June, the Oakdale Area Chamber of Commerce puts on a family picnic and business appreciation lunch at the North Fire Station. Here's some highlights from this year's events. We're almost out of time on this month's show. Before we go, here are some upcoming events. There are still some upcoming free summer concerts at the Walton Park Bandshell. On August 7th is a polka and dance band called Forever Young. On August 14th is a hornucopia which is a tribute to horns in the rock era. These concerts are from 7 to 8:30 p.m. at the Walton Park Band Shell on 15th Street in Hadley. A free movie in the park takes place on August 16th. The movie is How to Train Your Dragon, The Hidden World. The movie starts at dusk at Walton Park with concessions available beginning at 7 p.m. And finally, there are some free family fun events at the Discovery Center Outdoor Amphitheater, including Wendy's Wiggle, Jiggle, and Jam on August 8th at 10 a.m. and Yo-Yo Master on August 15th at 10 a.m. That's all we have time for on this month's Oakdale Update. For everyone at the City of Oakdale, thanks for watching.